Hello, hello. It's good when a plan comes together. Good afternoon, all of you marvelous folks, whether you are here in Marwick or paying attention on your computer screens or televisions. I'm actually delighted. I sort of thought with today's news that we might have three of us today, the speakers and myself, but here we are, and thank you for being here, and we look forward to today's conversation, in which we will take a deep dive into the background and history of this land that we call home, our beloved Monte Vista Grove. Let us pray together. And this prayer, I should say, is an Aztec Native American prayer as we begin this conversation. O God, only for so short a while you have loaned us to each other, because we take form in your act of drawing us, and we take life in your painting us, and we breathe in your singing us. But only for so short a while have you loaned us to each other, because even a drawing cut in obsidian fades, and the green feathers, the crown feathers of the quetzal bird lose their color, and even the sounds of the waterfall die out in the dry season. So we too, because only for a short while have you loaned us to each other. We pray in Jesus. Amen. Before I read our psalm, just a note that our hymn today will be number 713. If you'd like to start looking for that now in those really skinny pages in your hymnal, Touch the Earth Lightly, hymn 713. But first, let me read our scripture passage today, Psalm 65, which gives thanksgiving for the bounty and beauty of our earth. Praise is due you, O God, in Zion, and to you shall vows be performed, O you who answer prayer. To you all flesh shall come. When deeds of iniquity overwhelm us, you forgive our transgressions. Happy are those whom you choose and bring near to live in your courts. We shall be satisfied with the goodness of your house, your holy temple. By awesome deeds you answer us with deliverance, O God of our salvation. You are the hope of all the ends of the earth and of the farthest seas. By your strength you establish the mountains, you are girded with might. You silence the roaring of the seas, the roaring of their waves, and the tumult of the peoples. Those who live at earth's farthest bounds are awed by your signs. You make the gateways of the morning and the evening shout for joy. You visit the earth and you water it. You greatly enrich it. The river of God is full of water. You provide the people with grain, for so you have prepared it. You water its furrows abundantly, settling its ridges, softening with showers, and blessing its growth. You crown the year with your bounty. Your wagon tracks overflow with richness. The pastures of the wilderness overflow. The hills gird themselves with joy. The meadows clothe themselves with flocks. The valleys deck themselves with grain. They shout and sing together for joy. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Please stay seated as we sing together hymn 713, Touch the Earth Lightly.
Touch the earth
over 4 years, over 4 years ago now, in response to the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a diversity task force was created here at the Grove. Our initial concern was about the racism directed toward our African American brothers and sisters that seems to be more deeply rooted in our culture and our society than we had even imagined. Our concern was also for the systemic racism in which all of us have participated in both our society and in the church, whether or not we have been aware of it. Our hope from the very beginning was that we might create a more diverse and inclusive community here at the Grove, as well as to open the conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion as it impacts the community that we are becoming. And the hope is that we might become a more welcoming and diverse community. After all, a God who created over 400 varieties of lavender and over, believe this or not, 200 varieties of stink bugs, if that God cherishes and delights in diversity, perhaps we might follow suit. Time does not allow me to rehearse the many accomplishments of the Diversity Committee, now an actual subcommittee of the Board of Trustees Residents Relations Committee. But still, I want to thank our Diversity Committee members for their hard work over these past 4 years. And I would invite you to stand, whether you have cycled off a committee or continue to serve, or whether you're just coming on to the committee. If you would stand, that we might thank you for your work on this important endeavor. And we're minus a few of our members today, but thank them if you get a chance. They work hard, and we all feel like that's making an impact here as we, again, become who it is we believe God created us to become. While our efforts continue on addressing racism as it focuses on the African American community, we have begun to expand our focus to include other marginalized groups: Hispanic, Latino, Asian American, Pacific Islanders, LGBTQ+, Jewish, Arab American, Native American. It seems that so many of us have lived quite siloed lives in communities of people who pretty much look and seem and think just like we do. But given the state of the world, the time for that simply must end. And so part of our work is to learn the stories and lives of others, and that will connect us in ways that both enrich and challenge us. Our work continues. If you're looking for a committee to be a part of, just see me after the convocation. We do important work. Today's conversation follows on last week's important introduction to the Native American Gabrielino Tongva tribe that was given to us so brilliantly and compassionately and passionately by Mona Recalde. Cheryl Prentice actually made that connection for us. And is Cheryl here? Hi, Cheryl, thank you. And was also the one who asked the question about a year or so ago about whether our diversity team would be considering the long-standing oppression of the Native American community. And in particular, would we be making a land acknowledgement statement about the 13 acres that we call home? Our committee responded with, well, what's a land acknowledgement statement? And so we looked it up. This is what a land acknowledgement statement is about. And I quote, "A land acknowledgement statement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects the original indigenous peoples of a land. It can also acknowledge the enduring relationship between indigenous peoples and their traditional lands, and the negative impacts they have endured and continue to endure as a result of being forcibly dispossessed of their homelands." So, figuring out what that land acknowledgement statement was, we went to work. And ultimately, it is our hope to bring such a land acknowledgement statement and its implications to our larger community and to our Board of Trustees. And today's presentation is simply the first in what we trust will be a number of presentations, and this one focusing on the story of how it is that this land made its way into our hands. None of us, I believe, are Tongva Gabrielino, unless I am mistaken. But here we are. We were smart to ask two really smart resident lawyers to begin doing the research on the history of 2889 San Pasqual Street, Pasadena, California. Liz Cheadle served most recently as Dean of Students at the UCLA School of Law, and Tom Durff, after retiring from law, served as a clinical psychologist in the Bay Area. Both are relatively new residents of the Grove, and we are so glad that they make their home among us. Please welcome, beginning with Liz Cheadle.
Thank you, Lynn. Can everyone hear me if I speak at this? Okay. So we have learned an enormous amount last week from Mona Morales-Recalde, but a few weeks before that also from Lenore 3 Stars out of Spokane, who gave us a really excellent background for the more broader picture of Native American history. So I'm going to build on that. I really waited to start writing my remarks until we could hear from Mona last week, because I wanted to then sort of bring it more local and have you bring an understanding of what our little acreage meant during the time when this was all surrounded with Native Americans. And I just also want to briefly say that I became an ally and was interested in the Diversity Task Force for a number of reasons, Diversity Committee. And I want to explain like how my eyes were opened, because I was, after all, one of those fourth graders locally who built a mission project and whose family insisted as we drove through California that we would stop at every mission and visit it. But as Dean of Students at UCLA Law School, I got to know very well the people who are involved in the UCLA Law Native Nations Law and Policy Center, which has incredible faculty and draws students from all around the country, from all kinds of tribes. And that really sort of started opening my eyes a lot. Also, as a member of the board of the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, which is a state agency that acquires private property to turn it back into public lands for public use. We had, and I still say we because it's part of my life, been partnering with both the Chumash and the Tongva Gabrielino for more than, well, I say close to 40 years in terms of doing land dedications and doing, before land acknowledgements were even talked about, we were having sage ceremonies at park dedications. And also I currently own a home in the Sierra Foothills that is almost directly, well, a couple miles away from a reservation and a casino. And I've been able to watch the dynamics play out with the local community and the intertribal relationship and conflicts. So that brings me here, and it really is an honor and a privilege to be able to share with you what I have learned about the Tongva villages situated in the immediate area and the property that is now Monte Vista Grove Homes. Monte Vista Grove, not homes. Some of us are trying to make that editorial amendment. So just a few starting points. We don't have any evidence that there was an actual village or permanent structures here on our 13 acres. For one reason, we don't have any springs or water sources right here. But as I'll show you in a minute, we are only a half a mile from a village that lasted many thousands of years. And since we know, and Mona talked about this a lot last week, that the Tongva were hunter-gatherers, we can be certain that our land is a place where they would have hunted deer, coyote, rabbits, squirrels, lizards, birds, and gathered acorns, elderberry, and other edible and medicinal plants. I mean, all those critters that we see scattering around, they would have had a system in place to, catch and kill. So here's my first slide. The highlighted space, Akaranga, Sunny Slope Water Company. In 1852, Hugo Reed, and Tom will be talking more about him, published a series of letters describing 28 tribal villages in the San Gabriel Valley. And based on his observations, I'm going to talk about 6 of those. And Akaranga is the first of these. And it is located just 1/2 mile directly south of us, where the current Sunny Slope Water Company has a fenced area that I am sure if you could climb that fence and get over with an archaeologist, there are tons and tons of artifacts. In Tongva, Akaranga means where there is much firewood. So there has been archaeological excavations in the area directly between where we are and where the water company is. And according to the San Marino Historical Society, artifacts and hearths have been found during nearby residential development that date back to the ancient milling period, which is between 3,000 and 6,000 years BC. And this is maybe a good time to mention that the Autry Museum in Griffith Park has the second largest collection of Indian artifacts and art in the nation, second only to the Smithsonian. Now, much of what they have, they kind of snookered away from the Southwest Museum and then shut down the Southwest Museum. But that said, and so, the irony of Autry cowboy now having possession of all of the Indian artifacts. But I will say I've been looking at the Autry website, and they have some pretty interesting and amazing exhibitions going on. One currently is on the El Camino Real, what the Spanish called the El Camino Real, and how it was always initially an Indian, a Native American trail that was just taken over and renamed and kept by the white guys. So let's see here. Let me go. See if I can... Okay. Wait. I need to hold it right side up. Oh, right. Thank you. Okay, here we go. So this is a slide this picture was taken in the 1880s down at the Sunny Slope Village. At the time, there was still what they called a rancheria of Native Americans living. By that time, they had changed their huts to make them more sloped, but that was half mile from here in the 1880s. Okay, thank you. Keep reminding me. Now this I took through the fence. If you walk around down on Sunny Slope Boulevard, and you see in a minute I'll show you the marker that will identify where it is. You peer through. That is a dam that was built in 1821 with enslaved Indians who had been, this was their village. And then, as you'll see, most of the original villages are places where it was a good place to set up sites. So that's where when the Mexicans came, the Spanish came, they would take over those properties. So this was built in 1821. Okay, thank you. I knew I brought you for a reason. And the marker, the 1952 monument, of course, mentions the white guys who were involved in directing the enslaved people to build the dam. Does not mention other than Indian labor. So that's site number 1. So Shivanga is where the Mission San Gabriel is currently located. But think of the mission not as just that building. Think of it as a massive slave plantation with the mill, we'll see the mill in a minute, with the dam being a part of it, and the land extending out, and the Native Americans being, many of them brought in and forced to live, as Mona was talking about, at the mission itself. I believe that there were still obviously places where some Native Americans were allowed to stay or would flee the mission. There were a few failed insurrections during that time. But the mission itself, from 1771 to 1834, until Mexican independence, functioned as a slave plantation. It was the most economically successful mission in the entire system. And Jeannie Cobb might recognize this photo because she took it. I missed the field trip that was taken, but this is the place where they acknowledge the type of housing that the Native Americans would live in. The next one is San Marino High School, Sonanga. Hugo Reed described a marshy site on what he called Mr. White's farm. And there is apparently still an adobe located on the San Marino High School campus that was from that era. I couldn't find it. I wandered the campus a bit. But what I did find that really explains why it would have been an ideal place for Native Americans to establish a village is that there's a huge chain link fence you can see here that runs on the west side of San Marino High School. And then down the hill, there's this wide gully that you hear water flowing through. Even, the other day I was there. And so it would have been a perfect place to build a village. And it's just right there at San Marino High School. And San Marino High School does have a land acknowledgement. They have done that. And then this is an interesting place, Shishikawananga. I will try to pronounce it. And it's near the old mill, if any of you have been to. It's owned by the city of San Marino now. It's a lovely spot. It was completed as a grist mill for the mission in 1816, making it the oldest commercial building in Southern California, and it's still a museum. Water would flow from there to Mission Lake, which is now Lacey Park. And these are the millstones that they believe were the original millstones used. When the mill fell into disuse, they disappeared. And then one day, wandering the grounds of the Huntington Library Gardens, General George Patton found these and said he recognized them for what they were, and they were brought back to the old mill. And then Alupengia is where the LA County Arboretum is currently located. Growing up, I loved to go to the Arboretum because we would run around Tarzan's jungle. Today, you go and you see the Hugo Reed adobe and the Lucky Baldwin home. But I've wandered around a couple times looking for some signage that indicates that where the Native American village was, and there's nothing. They do have a land acknowledgement, but I asked one of the staff people when I was there this weekend, and he told me that they are actually now in conversation with the Gabrielina Tongva. They do have some remnants of an old Indian village, and they're working to figure out where best to locate those things, but it has not yet been decided. So I took a picture of where I think it should be. Because it's an area with water, and you can also see the type of vegetation that they would have used, they would have harvested to use to help build their thatched roofs or to weave their baskets. And then this last side, and I'm sorry, I didn't point out earlier, it's where it's circled is where I'm describing. I should have said that before. Always highlighted is where we are, the Akarunga, and then I have shown the individual places that I'm referencing. This is the mouth of the San Gabriel River where it leaves the foothills and flows down. I didn't go take a picture. So the close proximity of all of these settlements to each other suggests political, economic, and ritual ties. The villages would have 50 to 150 inhabitants. They would split and reorganize whenever the population grew too large for the natural resources to support a population. But the departing group would only take a portion of the components that they needed for a ritual performance, ensuring that the groups would have to come together to perform their ceremonies. That it wouldn't just be that they would establish a trade relationship, but they would stay connected because each one, they called them the moitié, would only have half or less of the components that they needed to have those ritual celebrations. So the land we occupy played an important supporting role to all the inhabitants that have been in the areas that I've described for many thousands of years. But with Mexican independence came private property ownership, and that's where Tom's research picks up, and I can turn it over to him.
Thank you, Liz. Very informative. Okay, my assignment was to trace the history of private ownership of this piece of property and to do the best I could without a chain of title report from a title company. You say, hey, Tom, you want to find out about the title history? Call the title company and get a chain of title report. They are very hard to come by, and if you can get one, they are very expensive. And near the end of my research, I made a trip to the LA County Recorder's Office down in Norwalk, spent some time in the basement where the early real estate records are kept, and I found out why they are so expensive. Maybe we'll have time to get into that a little bit later. The period of private ownership covers 183 years, beginning in 1841 with the first Mexican land grant to Hugo Reed, whose name you heard Liz mention several times. And that 183-year period extends to today. So what that means is that in the private ownership period, it has been Monte Vista Grove for 100 of those 183 years. That's an overall picture. I could conclude my, no. But we're going to begin by jumping to 1924, just 100 years ago. That, of course, is James Marwick. That's a picture I found down in a bottom drawer of a file cabinet over in the art room. And it's, he engraved it to Chauncey Spaulding, who was another person who was involved in establishing Monte Vista Grove. And I think he was the pastor at the church up in Santa Barbara at the time, which is where Marwick was making his place. He had acquired ranch property up there called the Braemar Ranch. As I thought about this, could Marwick have ever imagined that some guy would be standing in a hall named Marwick reading words that he wrote 100 years ago? But here are the words that he wrote on July 30, 1924. So we're just 2 months short of an actual 100 years, describing the property. Oh, sorry. Who knows? Okay. He described the property to the Synod of California in making the recommendation for the purchase of this land. And this is how he described it. I'm going to read it, so if you can't read it, don't worry. a property in Pasadena at San Pasqual Avenue, east of Rose Street, called Woodland, eminently suitable for the purpose of establishing bungalow homes. It has a frontage of 1,010 feet on San Pasqual Avenue with a depth of 640 feet. It covers 15 acres. The property started out as 15 acres, of which 7.5 acres includes a house, an orange grove with fruit trees, also a number of large oak trees and beautiful shrubbery. The other 7.5 acres is cleared land. This was something new to me. It was cleared land, particularly level and in all respects suitable for the building of the bungalows. The house itself, though somewhat old-fashioned, has a very home-like appearance. It is 2 stories high with verandas on both floors. It would make a comfortable central building, providing as it would 7 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, a large dining room, kitchen, and pantry, together with 2 reception rooms. It has an attractive mountain view, and we enjoy that attractive mountain view every day we walk out on this property. So, how did the property come to be this way? Who built that house, which of course became the ranch house? What happened on the property in earlier years? Let's talk conceptually for a minute. It's important to understand that there are 3 phases to the period of private ownership that began in 1841. The first phase was our 15 acres was just a little tiny part of Rancho Santa Anita, one of the Mexican land grants made in 1841. Second, in 1861, the southwest corner of Rancho Santa Anita was split off, sold to a gentleman named Leonard Rose, and our 15-acre parcel, not yet subdivided, was part of Sunny Slope. Then, in 1895, Rose had sold the property, and the company that had bought the property filed a subdivision map, actually creating the 2 lots that Marwick found in 1924. This is a map of the ranchos that were up in this area. Santa Anita in the center. To the west of us is San Pasqual with a C, not a Q, Rancho San Pasqual. And to the east of us, Rancho Azusa de Duarte. That's where we were, in Rancho Santa Anita, or where our piece of land was, in Rancho Santa Anita, down in the very southwest corner, near the border with Rancho San Pasqual. Now, to give you some idea of the size of these, San Pasqual and Santa Anita were each about 13,000 acres. San Pasqual became Pasadena, Altadena, and maybe some parts of South Pasadena, maybe a little San Marino in there. Santa Anita, which this land was part of, all of East Pasadena, Chapman Woods, the cities of Arcadia, Monrovia, and Sierra Madre. That's the size of property we're talking about here. This is what it looked like when Sunny Slope was split off in 1861. Now, I know this is hard to see, but just bear with me. This is a subdivision map, and this subdivision map was filed in 1895 by the L.J. Rose Company. The key part is page 2. The rectangular block that I have marked up there I hope you can see it clearly enough. That is our land, and this land was created by this subdivision map, lots 5 and 6 of Block 6 of Sunny Slope Estate subdivision number 2. I wish you could see the streets on this, but just to the south of that block is San Pasquale, of course. To the west is Rose Avenue. Rose became San Gabriel Boulevard in 1927. And to the east, the street immediately on the eastern border of our property was known as Monte Vista, which probably had something to do with picking the name Monte Vista Grove. But it was renamed El Nido in 1929. I do not know why the streets were renamed. This would be known as the Tom Durff version of a chain of title report. So these are the owners over this 183-year period. I'll just read them off quickly. Hugo Reed, Henry Dalton, Joseph Rowe, 2 men, Albert Dibley and William Corbett. Then we get into the Sunny Slope phase. Leonard Rose himself in 1861. He had it for 24 years, sold it to a company, a British group, in fact, called L.J. Rose and Company Limited. And it was that L.J. Rose and Company Limited that filed the subdivision map. And then, I believe, but cannot totally guarantee, that along came a couple named Averill E. Danielle and Abby Jane Danielle, bought the property around 1903, 1904. I've been unable to pin that down, and I'm pretty sure they built that house that was on the property in 1924. And then, of course, in 1924, the owner became the Synod of California of the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church of the United States of America. Full title. In 1940-41, the Synod decided they did not want to be in the retirement community business, formed a separate corporation, and spun it off to Monte Vista Grove Homes. Whoops. We're out of order here. Whoops. I think we ended up in the final omitting a couple of slides. Let's see. What shall I do? Okay. What I want to do is focus a couple of minutes on the Danielles who sold the property to the Synod in 1924. In the archives down in the basement of the Pasadena Museum of History, there are some city directories, the Thurston city directories that covered Pasadena, Altadena, and Lamanda Park. This area where we are at one time was known as Lamanda Park. I'll tell you how it came that way a little bit later. It became part of the city of Pasadena in 1920. Well, the first listing that I found for the Danielles was in the 1905 Thurston directory, and it indicated that the the Danielles lived on a residence on the north side of San Pasquale, second house east of Rose Avenue in Lamanda Park. I could not find out much about Mr. and Mrs. Danielle, but I did find out a great deal about their son, and I hope to show you a picture of him. He's a handsome dude in a World War I uniform. E.A. Danielle was a self-made designer and builder of homes. He was a secretary who sold cars. He worked in another small business, a lower level job, and then all of a sudden, he's in the home design and home things were more fluid in the 1920s than they are now. But he is said to have built over 5,000 homes during a 40-year career from the 1920s to the 1960s. They're built all over eastern LA County, mainly centered around San Gabriel Valley. But the early years of his career were in the 1920s and 1930s. He focused on North Pasadena and is said to have been, quote, the most prolific developer of bungalow heaven, close quote. So those familiar with that area, E.A. Daniel designed and built many, many of the homes up there. This ugly document, which you've all been looking at, probably one of the ugliest legal documents I've ever seen in my life. But it is the official record of the sale of the property by the Daniels to the Synod. And the part that I've marked up there is the part that covers the Daniels sale. But I found it in the basement of LA County Recorder's Office. Got lucky in finding it. Again, I can go into the details of that, but there it is. And I obtained a certified copy of it, and I think that will now become part of Monte Vista Grove records. Okay, so those are some facts. Let's circle back and add a little color, some information about how the property was used in the early years, some happy facts, and a couple of sad facts. The owners during the Rancho Santa Anita phase, when it was one big, huge 13,000-acre property, really did not do much. As has been said, Hugo Reed was initial. He's a local historical figure. He's got schools and streets and parks named after him, all kinds of information available about him on the internet, over at the Arboretum and other places. But he really didn't do much with the property. A few years later, he sold it to Henry Dalton. Henry Dalton was a very successful LA merchant and also owner of the neighboring Rancho Azusa de Duarte. So at one time, he owned both of those ranchos. He did not keep Santa Anita very long. The next owner was a guy named Joseph Rowe. He was a circus man. Joseph Rowe brought the first circuses to the West Coast up in the Bay Area in connection with the gold rush. There we go. That's the symbol for the Rowe Circus. He and his wife were going to retire from the circus business, and they picked this place where to spend their retirement. Couldn't stand to be away from the circus business, sold the property, went back in the circus business, went bankrupt a year later. A little rocky life for the Rowes at that time. Now, Dibley and Corbett, the next two owners, were interested in sheep herding, but they really didn't get much done around here. However, they later connected with a guy named Hollister up in Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo counties, and they became incredibly successful with Hollister. But they did do something very important to us, and that is they sold off the southwest corner, about 1,300 acres, to Leonard J. Rose. Leonard Rose was born in the Kingdom of Bavaria, came to the United States with his family in 1839, made his way to California in 1860 after a 2-year wagon train journey. He searched all over Southern California for the perfect place to settle and decided that the San Gabriel Valley was the best location. He bought the southwest corner of Rancho Santa Anita, and he called it Sunny Slope. That's an old picture of the home that the Roses built in around 1862. It was located, if you know where the Claiborne School is down on Huntington Drive, that's about where that house was located. The water company down here celebrated its 100th anniversary in 1995. They commissioned a history. This is the cover of that history. The house there, the reddish, pinkish house, is what the Rose home looked like in 1995. And you can see it today. It is still standing, still occupied, down at the corner of Sunny Slope and La Presa, a little south of Huntington Drive. It has actually been moved once, but it looks very much like that picture right there. So 1862, and it's still in use. Oh, you know what? That means that two other very key slides got omitted. That's too bad. So what did Rose do with the property? I wanted to show you the cover of a book called The City of Vines. It's too small for me to show it to you, which is a history of wine and winemaking in Los Angeles. This book was written in 2017. We, of course, don't think of Los Angeles as a winery area, but it was really big business in the 1850s, 1860s. The second thing I wanted to show you from that book was the original corporate seal of the city of Los Angeles, which existed from 1854 until 1905. The corporate seal of the city of Los Angeles, at the center of it, has grapes on a grapevine. So it was major, major business. So what did Leonard Rose do? Leonard Rose went into the winery business and made wine and brandy. That's a very old picture of the Sunny Slope Winery. It was located down around Huntington Drive, not too far from the home where the Rose home was. And the reason it was down there and not up here, although I had really hoped to find winemaking and brandy distilling happening here on this property, but couldn't come up with it. The reason it's down there is they depended on the water from the La Presa Dam site for their operations. They didn't have pumps. They depended on gravity flow. The flow was to the south. So none of those operations were up here. At the top is one of the Sunny Slope wine labels. This wine was sold all over the country. The brandy that they made in particular was very popular, sold to wholesale druggists all over the country for sale in drugstores. This is where brandy was sold in those days. Leonard Rose's son says that their brandy was so popular because of a little secret sauce. They added some sugar syrup, which gave the brandy a little distinctive taste and color. Let's go back. We're going to go back a couple here. Leonard Rose's true love was not winemaking. His true love was thoroughbred horses, particularly horses used as trotters for harness racing. He had bought a piece of property southeast of Sunny Slope, so he created a wonderful thoroughbred operation there to raise trotters, and he called it, named Leonard Rose, he called it Rose Mead. And that name still stands as the city of Rosemead because that's where his property was. And as you can see, Leonard was very prominent. He got himself in the Harness Racing Hall of Fame. I've learned that some people aren't impressed by that, but I was pretty impressed by that. We're going to miss this other sad fact. Another picture that got left out is a wonderful, fantastic mansion that Rose built on Bunker Hill in Los Angeles. Bunker Hill used to be the center of all the big mansions, the wealthy people in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, one of the sad facts I wanted to report, Rose took his own life in that house in 1899. Turns out, as his son says, whenever he went into new ventures, he always did it on borrowed money. And he just got to the point where he just grew weary of carrying all the debt. Okay, you've heard me refer to Lamanda Park as this section. Lamanda Park became part of the city of Pasadena, but where we are used to be part of Lamanda Park, unincorporated. There was actually a train station on the north end of Lamanda Park on the main railroad line from the east coming in this way. It became the Santa Fe Railway line. So the Lamanda Park station was up at what we now think of as the intersection San Gabriel Boulevard and Walnut Avenue. The reason I'm showing you the train station is because in 1946, it was used as a movie set. This movie set. The Bedford Falls railroad station in It's a Wonderful Life was filmed up at that railroad station. And my understanding is that that gentleman, Jimmy Stewart, is a friend of Catherine Cummings. Weren't you guys friends at the church? So that's the real reason I wanted to show that. Now, some parting words from James Marwick. These bungalows will last for 1,000 years. And during that time should bring comfort to many an old couple. That's it. Thank you.
Liz and Tom, what a rich, rich presentation. We are so very, very grateful. And I'm sure that there are some questions, interest in more detail. So here we go. Nancy?
I wonder if the land acknowledgement brings with it any sense of responsibility or any concrete contributions.
Up here, yeah. We can talk up here. Tom Renard is part of our subcommittee dealing with the land acknowledgement and is doing a great deal of research about land acknowledgements in the area, both inside and outside of the Presbyterian Church. I saw a recommendation from the San Gabriel Presbytery that included the words, I don't know whether this came from the General Assembly or not, that a land acknowledgement should admit complicity. Now, in my view, those of us who did not participate in the taking of the land all those years ago were not complicit, but we have certainly benefited from the taking of that land. So one of the things that the Diversity Committee will be working on is working on exact language where we can acknowledge that a lot of the taking of the land was done under the doctrine of discovery, which you heard Lenore Three Stars describe as the doctrine of Christian discovery, because the church was so closely involved in that. On the other hand, there are efforts to reclaim land. So we don't want to be writing a land acknowledgement that somehow opens us up to having this land reclaimed, or that would be my position. But that's going to work its way through the committee. up to the Board of Trustees. The community, I'm sure, will have input.
My question follows logically on that one for Liz. In the Spanish mission period, the San Gabriel Mission, did they have control over quite a large area?
Yeah, they did. I mean, the dam was what served their water needs. The mill is where they did all of their grinding, and they would just spread out. I mean, I think they felt that anything within that they could reach would, come under their authority. I didn't find anything to the contrary.
I can add something.
Okay.
As Liz said, the San Gabriel Mission was probably the most economically successful of all missions in the whole system. And its land area, the next mission was San Fernando. And I can't remember the name of the mission that way, but San Fernando was, so at some point between here and San Fernando is where the San Gabriel Mission still controlled land, and then the San Fernando Mission took over. But
And there
all,
was a downtown mission.
oh yeah, there were other missions around, but all three of those ranchos that I showed you, San Pasqual, Santa Anita, and others south of here, were all controlled by the San Gabriel Mission. It was huge.
Tom, Helen Botts here. Did you find out how Myron Hunt became involved at all in the laying out the plot?
How he became involved?
Yes.
No, I did not. I'm of course aware of that. That's part of what you learn. Do you have anything to add on that? I mean, you've been around here a lot longer than I have.
Not specific. I understand that he did not charge for this, that it was a gratis.
I've seen the same statement.
Yes.
Or if he did charge, it was a very
That's right.
minimum rate
Yes.
compared to what he got, because he was already a very prominent architect
He
in the
was,
Pasadena
certainly in
area.
Pasadena.
But how he got involved, did Marwick bring him in? I don't know. Maybe Robert Freeman of Pasadena Pres, who was also a key player.
Did you
Could have
know,
gotten him
did he
involved.
have Presbyterian roots? Did you know that, Myron Hunt?
I think I read somewhere that his wife was a Presbyterian and got him.
That's in my
pulled
memory
him-
as well.
Pulled him into it.
That's my memory as well. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'm interested in what happened to you as you were delving into all of this backstory.
I'll answer that first, because I've given it a little thought. 2 or 3 things happened to me. I had no idea I'd be interested in doing this much research or going down the number of rabbit holes that I went down doing the research. But I really gained a huge amount of respect for Ron White, Nancy Mackey, other historians who do this work. And the amount of work that's involved, the amount of places you have to go and dig up things, but I also learned something about their work. You know, we often hear about the joy of discovery. Well, you're not really discovering something because it already exists, but you're discovering it for yourself and for the project that you're working on. So there are many opportunities to experience the joy of discovery. I think Ron would agree with that, and I believe Nancy would.
And I'll just add that as someone who grew up here as a child and moved away for 50 years and became, during that 50 years, way more educated, enlightened, and aware of the issues, to then return here within, I grew up on Orange Grove Boulevard in Sierra Madre. I went to Wilson Junior High School. I went to Pasadena High School. I never knew Sunny Slope Water Company existed. I never knew, I was interested in, running through Tarzan's jungle at the Arboretum. So, yeah, there was that joy and pain of acknowledging that this history had just been hidden had just been hidden, mine certainly growing up years.
Well, yeah. I'll get to you, Dean. Here you go.
I'm just wondering if you thought of anything about signage. One way of doing reparations in Germany, for instance, has been to signify. And I'm wondering if you see any helpfulness in some kind of modest signage that could indicate these findings.
I certainly think so, and I've seen it in various places. And, I retired from UCLA almost 10 years ago, and when I left, they had no signage. And I went back a few years ago, and right where I used to park my car, right by Murphy Hall, which is the main administration building, there's a really lovely land acknowledgement. And for people to see that as they walk the land and have that reminder. I mean, I think, first step is we have to come up with whatever it is that we, want to have as a land acknowledgement. But then, personally, I would love to see something like that, as you enter the commons or somewhere on the property. And we can think of it every day when we walk past, and visitors will know.
It could be the antidote to the granite sign you pointed out near the water dam, where it's like, this was built by a bunch of white guys who said, you put that there. I can imagine that's the image that comes into my head. You said, Mr. Durff, that you were going to say a little more about how what you discovered about why documents or land titles were so doggone expensive if you could find one.
To try to make it quick, well, I'll give you a real quick one. I don't know. It's 5 after 5.
Go ahead. Just do a short summary, then you can have more conversation if you want.
Okay. All right. So to find that ugly document, I had to reserve time in the basement of the LA County Recorder's office. I get down there are 2 guys there, and they have the times reserved. You get your time slot. That's it. You go in, you give them the best information you think you have about where this transaction might have taken place. They say, oh, okay. And they go back and they either get books called grantee books or grantor books, because in a real estate transaction in California, the seller is the grantor and the buyer is the grantee. So I give the guy the information. He says, well, it'll be easier to look under the grantor name. So I go back, and he comes out with the grantee books. And I'm saying, and I just happened to notice that. All right, he goes back, he brings out the right books. My time is running. All right, so I started with August of 1924. You have to go down, they're books that are about this big, okay? And you have to go down each line looking for the name Abby J. Danielle as the grantor until you find Abby J. Well, I found a couple of transactions where she was the grantor, and so I sent the guy back to actually get the record. And while he's back there, I flipped ahead a month, just kind of looking. And there it was, Abby J. Danielle to the Synod of California, So the guy comes back with a microfiche record, and then I send him back and say, no, this is the one we want. And that's what produced that. But if you're trying to do a chain of title report, you have to go through that for every particular transaction. And if you don't have a month in a particular year, you got to start. So how are you going to do that half hour, hour at a time in your time slot? So the title companies, no. I mean, if you're doing a $100 million transaction, they'll be really happy to produce a chain of title report for you, but, yeah. Pardon? How much did they pay for the road? $60,000. Yeah, and it was a fairly short-term note from what I think was a predecessor of Security Pacific Bank. Yeah. But back in the days when the entire Rancho Santa Anita was changing hands, prices like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, but you're talking about $1,850. So.
I have a couple comments. Just know that this is the introduction to this whole process of land acknowledgement. And our hope is we don't want to just have something on a plaque or a statement that we put in our bylaws or wherever statements go these days, but we want it to be meaningful and for there to be some action that comes out of that. And so we're really just at the beginning, given I'm sure that Liz and Charles don't, or excuse me, and Tom don't want to say that we're just at the beginning because they have invested so much time and energy to get us this far. But your diversity committee is really at the beginning of trying to figure out exactly what this means, and we want to keep coming back to you with here's where we are, what do you think? And so if you have thoughts on this particular part of diversity at the Grove, please see Liz or Tom, and they'll bring it back to the committee and we will keep working on that. So again, we have a lot of work still to be done on this, but it's exciting work and important for us to recognize that we reside in a place that perhaps it does not really belong to us, it belongs to God. And we are most grateful for that. Huge thank you to Liz and Tom for all of their work. That was a huge endeavor on their part, and we're most grateful. And then I want to say a couple of words about the next two convocations.
I just want to make a pitch. If you have not seen the pictures in the stairwell of the administration building, I really encourage you to look. Those bungalows that are to last 1,000 years have not changed much. And you can pick and you can see which ones and how they look now. And there's a picture of the original ranch house and a picture of the original orange grove. So anytime we're there, 9 to 5, go up the stairwell and take advantage of that. Because Bill Hansen worked very hard with the history committee, and I love that it's continuing.
And they're really fun pictures, and I'm so glad I didn't live in that era. Those women had to dress in the most outrageous clothing. So.
I guess they were told, don't smile.
Don't smile and wear things that are unbearable to wear. So.
Hoping to recreate it, though, for our 100th gala.
Great.
You can get some of you, because that building where we're in is right there with people there in front of it.
It's a great tour up the stairwell, so give yourself a gift by doing that. I do want to say a couple of things about the next 2 weeks as we enter June, which has become Pride Week. And last year we celebrated our first Pride Week here at the Grove, and we're continuing with that this coming next two convocations, actually the next 2 Thursdays. And I'm going to ask you to, as best you can, as we again try to learn and understand where other people sit, what their stories are, how they came to be who they are and where they are. I'm going to ask you to kind of put away any kind of prejudgments, any sort of certainties about sexuality. Next 2 weeks, we're going to be focusing and looking and listening to conversations about transgender. And I know for many of us, that's a bridge too far. I'm going to ask you to shorten that bridge and say, I will come to these 2 conversations and listen and learn and hear from those who sit in that particular place. And not to come with this is wrong because we're Christians and the Bible says so. It is really important that we listen to and hear from those who are different from ourselves. So we will have 2 guests next Thursday at 4 o'clock, both from the transgender community. And I urge you to be here and come with open minds and hearts and a lot of compassion and love as we have that, discussion together. So please join us, and that's it. Enjoy dinner. Thanks for being here today.